Our next series of artworks are going to be from the Neolithic period. So we're moving forward in time from the Paleolithic, the really, really old stuff, to the Neolithic, the newer old stuff. Now, the division between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic period is defined by the end of the Ice Age. Remember this map I showed you? And I said that the Ice Age is a time when most of the world was covered by these large glaciers of ice, and the temperature was much more extreme as you went closer to the poles. At the end of the Ice Age, what we saw was a recession of these glacial masses and a greater warming up of the larger environment or ecosystem in which the humans lived. And what this caused was more land to be exposed from beneath the glaciers. And with that, more land meant animals. Animals could move farther than they could before. And people who were chasing these animals, or people who wanted to find more food, had more land to migrate through. So the end of the Ice Age comes with this greater change of human behavior as animals started to leave these spaces, humans started to move farther and farther from each other. And what that does in terms of art, it's very interesting. In terms of art, we start to see the development of things like textiles and pottery. We see greater or more elaborate or more intricate craftsmanship. Why? Because not for everybody, but for many humans around the world, what we see is a settling of spaces. Rather than continuing to migrate with the seasons and with the animals or the vegetation that they wanted, we start to see during the Neolithic is we start to see larger permanent settlements. And these larger permanent settlements have larger populations of 500 to 1,000 people. And what we have is, like I said, textiles, pottery. We have more permanent structures. And so when we look at the Neolithic, we're thinking of the same struggles of fertility. We're thinking of the same struggles or elements of the human condition. But now as the environment is changing, so too will human expression change. Does that make sense? Okay, I think I was getting a little philosophical there. Another thing that happens at this time is we start to see animal husbandry and agriculture. Now, what is animal husbandry? Honestly, when I was a student, I would never pay attention when teachers would explain these things. And so I thought, animal husbands, like, are you marrying your animals? No. Animal husbandry means a relationship with animals where the animals are domesticated. They are kept, they are controlled by humans. And what we see are early domestic husbandry of sheeps and goats, and then later pigs. Because people are staying in one spot, they're like, you know what, I really want some goat milk, but I don't want to chase this herd 200 miles away. So I'm just going to keep a few goats, and then they'll have babies, and then those babies will have babies, and I'll have all the goat milk I want. It's a concept that we take for granted, but it is a concept of settlement that we start to see developing in the Neolithic. The same goes for agriculture. It's at this time where humans start to understand that, you know what, I really love blueberries. And rather than trying to go find blueberries out in the wilderness, what if I take these blueberry seeds, plant them here, and then they'll grow here near me so I can have all the blueberries I want. So agriculture and animal husbandry are elements of this end of an ice age where we start to see settlements and larger villages of 500 to 1,000 people start to develop. Miss Cortez, what is this, an archaeology class? What is this, an anthropology class? What are we doing here? Where's the art? The art is in the settlements. We're going to look at the settlement called Çatalhöyük. Now, in terms of scholarship and recent archaeological activity, what we have at Çatalhöyük is one of the oldest settlements in human history. Not the oldest, but one of the oldest, we can say. And it's located on the Turkish peninsula. It's called Çatalhöyük because it is located in a forked mound, which is the translation of Çatalhöyük. So that's not the name that they use. That's the name that archaeologists have used to define this site where they have found a settlement. The settlement has been part of a very recent archaeological dig. Here is an image of the settlement site by archaeologists. It's covered by this hangar structure to protect it from exposure from the elements. And in terms of its discovery, it was only recently discovered, like 1958. Now you might be thinking, Ms. Cortez, 1958 is not that recent. In terms of the archaeological record of time of human history, yeah, it's fairly recent. And because it was discovered in 1958, it means that it hasn't been looted or destroyed by previous human involvement or settlements. The official excavation of the site began in 1961, and it went on periodically throughout the 60s and 70s, and then the most recent excavation started in 2017. Now, the current team of about 160 workers has gathered up data and has, I believe, either published it or they're about to publish it. You will need to check that out if you want to know more. I can check it out for you. But the most recent finds have been gathered at this site between 2017 and 2019. It's very exciting. What kind of sites, what kind of sounds, what kind of spaces are these that we're looking at here? Well, the site, Çatalhöyük, here you can see the excavation team, the most recent excavation team, shows that the people who lived here led a sedentary life, meaning that they stayed in one place. They were not migratory. Instead, their activities were those that were conducive to staying in one place. What do you mean, Ms. Cortez? Well, their activities including weaving and metalwork and pottery. These required spaces where specialized equipment and specialized training and a lot more time would be required of the people. And what we see here at Çatalhöyük is a development, a refinement of craftsmanship in weaving and metalwork and pottery because they have the time and the space to stay and perfect these skills. Also, the scale of these artworks, where we can see in some migratory areas, we can see smaller elements of pottery being made or textiles being made. Here at Çatalhöyük, the artworks are bigger, they're heavier, they're more substantial in size and time and scale because you simply don't have to move. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna paint this big pot and then I'm going to carry it on my back and then truck it across 200, 300, 400 miles. Instead, I'm staying here so I can work on this big thing. Does that make sense? What I'm doing is I'm giving you a lot of context. The settlement, based on the archaeological findings, shows that people lived, an estimated population of about 1,000 people. They lived in these square rooms, and there were no streets. Instead, they were condensed one next to another, and the interiors were accessed by rooftops. Here we have an artist's rendering or a restored view of the site. This is what we believe Çatalhöyük to have looked like when it was populated. It was located next to a river. The river would have provided fresh water. It would have also provided a stream for food, fish. It also would have provided a space for communication because you could hop on a boat and go up or downstream and you would be connected with other people far and near. We have evidence of animal husbandry outside of the dense square units of Çatalhöyük. So we know that they had farming, they had fishing, They had some kind of a trade unit along that riverfront. The doors to each of the units were accessed from above. Now we see this in a lot of settlements, even still today. This type of entrance from the top is practical. It's practical because it prevents any unwanted invaders, including pests or beasts, to enter into your house. It also provides an area or a living space on the top of the unit. Now, each of these units would also have sometimes connections to other units within the space, but like I said, the main dwellings were accessed by these rooftops here. When we understand Çatalhöyük, we have to understand this change in behavior from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic. What we have are specialized forms of living. What we have are those who specialized in animal husbandry, those who specialized in fishing or textiles or pottery. If you're really good with languages, maybe you're a merchant because you could speak the languages of your neighbors and you could negotiate trade. So what we have in the Neolithic period is specialization of forms. What's very interesting at Çatalhöyük is those bodies, those human remains that have been found, show people to have the same amount of wear and tear on their bodies, no matter the gender. So it doesn't seem as if there was specific hard labor or manual labor dedicated to a gender. So there, based on archaeological evidence, perhaps some gender equality going on here. When we look at the interiors of Çatalhöyük, everybody seems to have the same kind of stuff in their houses. This is important because it shows that there is very little class differentiation between people. It's not like some of these are really junky and run down and dirty, and others are extremely opulent, extravagant. There is this equality, this equal living quality between the people. So we see, based on archaeological evidence, some form of labor equality between genders, very little class distinctions between peoples. When we look at the genetics of these people, we see families that live together, but also we see the intermarrying of people within this village and from outside the village. What's really curious is that the burials of the people are inside the dwellings, that there are bodies that have been treated and cared for and then placed in the floors of these squared areas. Here we are looking at a unit in Çatalhöyük. Now I'm going to stop here and we're going to pick up in Çatalhöyük and we're going to look at this space in terms of the artworks and the evidence of art in Çatalhöyük.